Good morning. It is Flow Chasers Monday, and I'm Lacey. I'm presenting a theory on accessing the flow state. The reason I do this at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning is because I think that it's a great time to be reminded as we start to pursue our professional ambitions that chasing flow and chasing goals are two different things. And I'm going to show that in here. So there is a plan uh, with like this whole video. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am. In short, I'm a brand and web designer for service-based businesses. I also have a squiggly brain that is hard to control sometimes. And I have been in burnout actually very recently because of a medical thing. And how that has led me to really identify chasing flow as uniquely different than chasing goals. A little bit about this presentation. There's no selling. There's nothing that I am hoping to get from you except for maybe a passion and an invigoration for the things that really light you up. Hard sell there. And I do this every Monday in 2026. This is one of my challenges to explore what doing a presentation over and over again every week would do for the quality of my work and the organization of my thoughts. So that's why I'm here. It's about a 30-minute lecture. In the beginning, it was more like 45, and I've gotten it more concise as we progress into April. And there are notes and links are on my website. It's highly anticipated.net/Mondays. And if you're thinking that this looks like a completely different slide, I am redoing my branding and my website. So we are in a transition phase. I will eventually redo this whole slide presentation, or gradually I'm going to redo it, but here's where we're at. So a little bit about who I am. I talked about like my professional life and that I have a squiggly brain. I've been running this creative business for over 10 years. I'm a highly sensitive person with very inconsistent energy patterns. And I'm somebody who likes to deep dive in interdisciplinary study. Like project-based work in my brain is very well suited because I like that immersion into these concepts and ideas that I get from my work. And I'm somebody who has a lot of personal and professional goals. So this isn't like I'm saying goals are bad. I'm saying that sometimes it gets a little confusing when you're working towards something. And if it is in alignment with what you authentically desire versus something that other people want from you. And that's where we get into burnout. Here's the pattern that I see, and having this squiggly brain of mine makes me really good at identifying patterns, is you have this high capacity person and they're recognized for being able to do this thing. And people like it when this person does the thing. But the thing, while very easy and natural to this person, or maybe it's very laborious, but they're still very good at it, that thing is not fulfilling to that person's true desires. So when they set the goals for productivity, often it is the productivity goal that appeases the people that they get the praise from. And this can lead to burnout. And burnout is there's this internal force that you feel compelled, whether with your focus, your energy, your excitement, that like vital life force that we all get when we're talking about something that we're passionate about and that we love, right? So when we squash that down for another person's agenda because that other person's agenda feels safer to us than our own, that is a really big red flag that we are headed into the chasing goals and that we're not going to be able to get into the yummiest, most wonderful part of focused and diligent work, which is the ability to access the flow state in our professional capacity. The flow state is everywhere, right? And so we're going to get into what I would define the flow state as, but I want you to think about this as very much an individual flavor. My favorite ice cream is this Indian ice cream that they have in Crossroads, Bellevue, and it's, Faluda Kulfi, and it's like rose ice cream. Yours might be chocolate or mint ice cream. Mine is Faluda Kulfi. Like, whatever your flavor of flow is, it is specially and uniquely made just for you, and it's a really special thing. And here's what I think is happening when we are in flow. Oh, and I just switched over these slides. There's a little bit of distortion. Next week, I'm hoping to fix that. So you have your comfort zone, right? And how big your comfort zone, that depends on like what's going on. Did you and your spouse just like get into it before you went into work? Have you had enough sleep? Have you had enough water? How are you doing? So that comfort zone. And then towards the edge of your comfort zone, but not past it, you have this experience of asking questions of, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm curious about what's going to happen next. So, like the what, why, how does this work? That is at the edge of our comfort zone. And at the edge of our comfort zone, all the way up until we become dysregulated. Dysregulated, it also looks like a lot of different things. It can be something as simple and benign as like, I need to go to the bathroom. All your attention is on that physical force, and then you leave whatever flow state or hyper focus that you're in and you go to the bathroom. So then you have like the dysregulation zone. So this potentiality for flow, where people observe physical and mental differences, like their postures, maybe they're locked in. I have ADHD, while we are known to have very hard to drive focus, we do hyper focus. And I get into these flow states where I hyper focus. It's complete focus and absorption. And some of the things that happen in the flow state are really yummy for people with ADHD. So it's a really great physical phenomenon that is happening in our bodies and our brains, and I believe in our souls, that is like completing this. And it's all the way from the very edge of your comfort zone until dysregulation. And dysregulation, so anything benign from I need to go to the bathroom up to I am so overwhelmed, I am yelling and throwing things. No judgment. Like if that's your flavor, like I've had mine too. But why does it feel so good? Because whenever I say the flow state, it's like this bell for minds that are intelligent. Maybe they've gone through burnout. And the reason that this state is so desirable is because your brain is literally getting this cocktail of what if the street equivalent would kill a person, but your brain is just making this naturally when you are in this state right between the edge of your comfort zone all the way up to dysregulation. And you're getting dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, and anandamines. And the effect is there's a lot of different things going on, but it's quieting the prefrontal cortex. That's your inner critic. That's the part that regulates, like, this is taking you a really long time. This doesn't look good. Why do you think you can do this? That quiets down. And when that quiets down, you're just more in the flow. You don't have to judge the work that you're doing so much. You can just be in it. You can be in the possibilities without getting dysregulated, thinking like, oh, I'll never do it. I can never do that. We're getting into dysregulation zone right there. Um, and dysregulation zone, by the way, is the natural completion of a flow cycle, a flow session, right? You have to get to a point where either the time, outside forces, attention, something comes to an end. And the end of my flow session a lot of times has been a timer. And then I give myself a gratitude where I like a 10-minute buffer. So when that timer goes off, I know about 10 minutes and then I have to wrap up because my brain really likes getting into it and feels very torn when it has to like go away from something that's just really yummy and challenging. So I'm going to talk about how to chase flow. And if you hear any bit of this is the way you do it, prescriptionness, I that is not coming from my words, hopefully. I want to say how unique I've seen people tap into flow. My husband, very much physical flow. He teaches kids and like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So when he rolls and he practices and he's in physical movement and he fire spins and he does all these like cool things with his body, he's very much in the flow of that physical practice. Me, I need like artifacts. I want to jump around. I want a strategy that I'm running. That is how, like, one of the ways that I chase flow that feels the most like alive to me. So, how do you chase flow? Like, when do you feel the most lit up, engaged, the most time melty away? You know what I mean? That just phenomenon and the work that is created is just so much better. And yeah, it's a fun thing to chase. What's not so fun to chase is like the shitty flow side. And as I've been learning how to chase flow, I often have confused chasing flow with chasing goals. And sometimes there's a lot of overlap, and sometimes the difference is shitty flow. Shitty flow when is a response to zoning out and becoming less conscious where you get that like time melty. I mean, tell me about like when you're scrolling on your phone and you look up and it's like, shoot, it's been an hour and a half. Like, why am I doing this? That is shitty flow. You've gone unconscious, engaged your brain into this process where only, part of it is thinking and it doesn't do anything for your soul, your purpose, for your goals. It just doesn't feel right. Or maybe it's for another person's agenda. There's no connection to it. But the more we engage in these like unconscious flows, I feel like the harder our brains are to drive and to engage with like the type of flow that lights you up. And by the way, I am not just talking about work, I'm talking about conversations with friends and how you clean your home and all these other potentialities for like good quality restorative flow sessions versus the flow sessions where you lose track of time and there's no restoration or benefit to you that happens. Be on the lookout for that. What are your shitty flow parts and how do they affect you? How do you feel afterwards? Because I run a business, I've been really interested in how to create this very high flow business because, especially as market conditions are so volatile, if I can adapt the same kind of responsive flow that I get into when I'm in a good flow session where there's like a challenge that comes in and I'm like rallying for it, I want to identify how do I drop into that flow state without getting overwhelmed or not avoiding overwhelmed, but prolonging the overwhelm to be able to get the most juice and vitality out of every situation that I can. So this is how some of the hallmarks of what I think would be the framework and scaffolding, the load bearing walls of a high flow business. And that is being mission driven. You have to know like why you're doing the thing, like why it actually matters for people. In my own business, when I did this free work, I really thought about for service professionals, like the reason why my business matters to them is because they need to look professional because they have a high amount of referral based business. They also have industry regulations, such as law like bar associations that they need to be up to regulation on. Like industry compliance is like a big thing for them. And they need a way to access their work in a repeatable way so that they can be consistent and show up and stuff. So when I really was like, they should have this, and the mission is to get this package to them. I had so much flow in everything that created from that when I really attached to what I was going to be able to deliver and give. So it's like the connection to like the mission, I feel is so vital for that. We also need freedom to implement these changes as we see, because if we maybe I need to move like adaptive to number one, because as these things come in where we are needing to adapt, do you have enough freedom to make those adaptions? Because if you don't have enough freedom, it doesn't matter if you have adaptions or not, you're not able to implement them, and some level of your consciousness is always going to know that. And as somebody who, one of my mental bugaboos is I have a tendency to only ask for like just barely enough. So when I ask for a budget, if I think I could comfortably do it for 4,000, I would say, okay, but how could I do it for 3,500? And then I would, only get 3,500 and then wonder why I was always kind of like strapped to get things like completed at the last moment. You have to give yourself enough freedom to be able to work and complete the thing. You have to have enough resources and enough freedom and enough autonomy to act. Focused and consistent. Consistent is a trigger word for a lot of us with ADHD. We have this idea that if we can't do something at a certain cadence consistently, that we're not going to be successful. Consistency is an opportunity that is provided to everybody. There are ways, if you are very opposed to any consistency constraints, you can actually set up a business where that is not a thing. It would involve like a reservoir and automations and systems and stuff like that. So it's not something that you have to do, but it's something that you can leverage as a trigger into flow. The best example that I can say is this presentation. I'm somebody who avoids the consistency, but having something that is repetitive, that I'm coming back to and making incremental, small amounts of progress every time I do this, it's been such a gift. It's been such a richness that consistency as a tool has been. I already talked about adaptive, clear goals and directions. You got to make sure that everybody is going in the same way, because we create different agendas and maybe the business isn't the model for that. So clear goals and direction gets everybody rowing in the same direction so that you're not losing the power from not having those clear goals. And then growing capacity. How do you grow capacity? I believe that this comes from nurturing when you need to stop, when you're in the dysregulation zone, and building up that anchor of a solid comfort zone. There's a few things. I think the removal of shame and doing therapy and trauma work is hugely beneficial to the flow and creative process, because to get to the edge of our comfort zone, we have to feel worthy and comfortable making mistakes. Because if the punishment for making a mistake is too great, we aren't able to access this yummy flow state, because we're just in anxiety mode, which is legitimate. So, as much as you can stay regulated, that is how we grow our capacity for the flow state. So, everything that you are doing this week, as far as a physical practice, a mental practice, a social emotional practice, feeling your feelings, doing the meditation, doing heart map cohesion, um, love and kindness meditations, these, I believe, increase your capacity for flow, because they increase the span of your comfort zone and put off the dysregulation zone. I believe that there's steps for good flow, and you will know your personal triggers that would make it hard for you to stay in flow. One thing to consider is that if you are regularly in a hyper focused state and ignore early signs of dysregulation, I believe what happens is your mind has a ricochet effect and it won't as easily drop into your next flow situation because it's convinced that that is a dangerous situation. Because if you regularly get into these great flow states where you're working and then put off going to the bathroom, your bladder is going to talk to you. That is like a biological need that you have. And then you're putting it off, you're putting it off, you're putting it off. When you sat down the next time, maybe you don't need to go to the bathroom, but your body says there's something about this position, this mindset, this situation that is dangerous for me, and perhaps it won't let you get into the flow state as easily. So, remembering to stop at that first time and know that this is something that builds with body trust, with capacity, with how you're feeling in the moment based on sleep, hydration, all the factors that like make us human, right? But steps to good flow are that self-regulation, centering values and purpose, finding alignment with like what you're doing and why you're doing it, defining a clear goal. I like to remove distractions sometimes, and sometimes I like to have a lot of artifacts to jump around and follow. I think that I might remove distractions because what is distracting to me might not be distracting to you. And then stop what you need to for all the reasons that I said before to get into these states where your body feels safe accessing the flow state for short periods of time, for long periods of time, for whatever amount of time that you want, really stop at the first signs of dysregulation. Also, pro tip, if you really, when you drop into the flow state, you really drop into the flow state. I set timers. I'm really nervous about like not picking up my kid or like missing a meeting and stuff. So I'll often set a timer before I start working on something in case I get into that flow state and then it's a loss. I'm not going to see the time. Another part that makes accessing the flow state, because there is a difference between goals, which I believe are more of what the people who have expectations on your value, your productivity, your roles in life. I believe that's more in the realm of goals. What's more in the realm of flow are the things that it's accepting your own challenges and constraints in life, but also your own talents and experiences. And knowing that whatever stew that is, that it's worthy of acceptance and support. I believe that that is a foundational framework of flow, because if you're chasing a goal, almost the assumption is that I'm not worthy until I've reached that goal. But when you're chasing flow, it's like because I am in an abundance of worthiness, I am going to channel my energy into the creation, the participation, the flow of this thing that I am doing. It's really a beautiful gift that when it's tapped into alignment can be such an incredible life altering thing. We can expand our capacity to stay into the flow when we ask questions and we can stay curious. We can honor our body's signals to end the session. And by accepting challenges that come in as this adaptability, almost aid that is coming to your rescue. So other people might see it as challenges. Somebody else might see it as the thing, the constraint needed to get where you need to go. I think about this from the perspective of Scrabble, that if you get really easy letters, first of all, if you get all vowels, it's really hard to get high points on all vowels unless you get like the right spacing. You need hard letters to get the most points in Scrabbles. The Q is worth 10 because you have to pair it with the U. You cannot win Scrabble against a good player with A's, E's, I's, O's, and U's that are only worth 1 point. So you need some Q's, you need some K's, you need some like you need some challenges. And so part of expanding the capacity is learning how to take those challenges as a flow trigger, engage and initiate at the very edge of your comfort zone where it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited. This is good. Thank you. Thank you for watching this presentation. We'll see if this ages well, but we're about 15. Are we about 15, 10, 10, 12, something like that, in the